Danielle again, and today we're going to take a little deeper dive about what you do once you're measuring your heart metrics and you're starting to see the trends. And what do you make of that? Okay, so most of you have gone through a workshop, likely with me, where you've gone through and defined your heart metrics. And no matter if you define 3 heart metrics or 23 heart metrics, your next step is to go ahead and start measuring them and see what they start telling you. And remember, you're always looking at trends. You're not looking at absolute value. You're looking at trends and whether they're going up or down. Now, what I found is a lot of teams have a little bit of a difficult time making the transition from defining the metrics to starting to measure them. So I'm going to ask you guys to take a leap of faith and put your toe into the water and go ahead and start measuring them. And for those teams that came up with 23 or even 12 metrics, I'm going to suggest that you pick 4 to 6, no more than 6 metrics that you start measuring, and then you kind of check it out and see what you're learning from them and validate that those are the right metrics. And what you do is just go through your metrics and ask yourself 2 questions. Can I measure this now? Do I have the data to start trending this? And if the answer is yes, that's one positive. And then the next question is it meaningful? I.e., would I feel comfortable talking to my boss or my boss's boss about this metric and explaining why it's meaningful and why it's something that we should track? And if your answer is yes, yes, then it's a candidate. And then again, just pick 4 to 6, no more. And if you only have 3, that's okay, but just get started, all right? And then produce your dashboard. All right, don't make this a big project and make it a big development project to go and automate everything so it comes up and it's really beautiful. Don't worry about that right now. Just bloody get your data into an Excel spreadsheet and trend it, and then paste your little charts onto a PowerPoint slide. Make it simple. Keep it simple, silly, because this is the best way to get started. And if you go down the road in a few weeks and you go, you know, I thought this was a great metric, but it's really not telling me something, it might be a metric that you're not going to track in the end. And so if you went through a big development project to create an automatic dashboard, now that means you have more development work to do, etc. And it just makes it more complicated than it needs to be to start. So pick 4 to 6. Get them in an Excel spreadsheet, put them on a PowerPoint slide. It doesn't even have to be pretty. Just start measuring them and looking at them and wondering what they mean. So remember, the goal here is not meeting some number or making some metric. The goal here is to pick metrics that you can learn about that are telling you something about the effectiveness of your product. So I'm going to go through some examples here, and they're going to be quite different examples about what teams who are doing this today are learning from their metrics. So the first team that I'm going to use is one of the examples that we used in the workshop, and that is the compliance team. And we're going to go ahead and talk about one of their adoption metrics. And the adoption metric is to improve adoption and use of PackBot within T-Mobile. Sounds pretty straightforward, and it's really good, remember, to have straightforward metrics. And then the way that they're going to measure that is they want to see increasing numbers of unique visitors per week, and then they're instrumenting with Matomo. So that's their goal and their metric, and they map really well together. Okay, so let's look at this metric and see what it's trending. So you can see that the metric is trending up and down. And notice that this is a simple, kind of ugly chart, and it's just an Excel spreadsheet, and that's fine because you want to keep it simple when you start out. And here you see 2 lines, and they're both 2 different types or measures of unique users. And the one that we really want to look at here is the lower one, or the orangish one. So anyway, the questions that you want to ask is, what do I expect to be happening with this metric given the current situation? Well, I ask that in a very specific way because there's another question that you might want to ask instead, and that is, what do I want the metric to be doing right now? And you might want this metric to be constantly going up, but there may be actions that you need to take in order to make the metric go up, and if you're not taking those actions, you may not expect it to be going up right now. So the question here is based upon the current situation, what do I expect the metric to do? The second question is, well, what is happening with the trend? And that's where you're going to compare the two. What are my expectations and what is actually happening? So the first question you ask Brian, he says, well, I'm constantly taking action to drive this metric up, so I expect to see it steadily increase. What is happening? Well, the trend is spiking and going up and down. And Brian's just a little curious about why he's seeing such a dramatic spike up and down. So the next thing that we do is we go and we consider what are the reasons behind spikes and troughs in the metric. So let's go look at those. So with this metric, we got together as a team and we brainstormed on what are all of the things that could be happening that could be driving this metric up or down. And so one of the things that came up that was key was that this team is constantly introducing new policies and new notifications. And new notifications are when they push a message out to the user and say, hey, you got an issue, you need to do something about it. And so this very possibly and hopefully is driving users to go into the system and to take action to correct some of their vulnerabilities. So this is a very possible driver of the volume. And so how does Brian go out and see if one of these is truly what's happening? Well, the first thing is he wants to look at his notifications. When are you sending out your notifications? What are your notification volumes? And do those peaks match where the unique user or unique visitors are peaking? And if the answer is yes, then it's probably one of the drivers. The other thing is new policies. So if, again, you need to look at when you're introducing your new policies, and are your new policies also driving usage up? So do those volumes correlate? And if the answer is yes, then probably some of your policies are driving increased visits. So that is the most probable thing, but we looked at other options as well. One of the other possibilities is a special kind of notification, and that's one-click notifications. And so this is kind of new for this year, and the team really wants to understand how these one-click notifications are driving usage of the tool. And so they again want to do just what they did with the others, is look at when they're introducing these new one-click notifications and see if there's a correlation with increased visits. All right, so all those are pretty simple and straightforward. Let's look at other options. So another thing that Brian does that is different than what the tool does is he is actually going out and creating campaigns where he is sending out notifications or creating some sort of event to tell people that they should really be visiting PackBot more often and paying more attention to their compliance. And so he wants to know whether or not his promotion or his campaign is working. So again, same thing. He needs to look at when he's sending out his promotional or campaign materials and see if those the people receiving those, if he sees a spike of usage following those campaign activities. So that's another option. So we didn't stop there. We wanted to look at a number of different metrics, and I'm going to share these with you because some of these may also be applicable for you, and you might want to take a note of these and keep an inventory of the reasons why your metric could go up or down. First is really simple. There could be a company holiday, and so that drove usage down. There could be an outage that happened that during the time that your tool was down, people couldn't use it, so that could drive it. There could be a reorganization that impacted the pattern of usage, and that often depends on what type of organization change it was. Was it a tool moving to a different ownership, or was it just a team moving to different management? There could have been a big media security breach announced, and when that happens, we always see usage of PackBot go up because people want to go make sure that they don't have any of those vulnerabilities in their assets. There could be an RDS certificate expiration coming up, and when we do have those coming up, people are generally going into the tool more to make sure that they're undertaking the activities that they need to keep their certificates from expiring so that they don't see an outage. There could have been a quarterly leadership review, and when we have those, we talk about cost and compliance with VPs and directors. So the VPs or directors could be coming out of those meetings asking some questions about compliance, and people might be going into the tool to get the answers for them. There could be a new merger or acquisition that could change the usage of the tool. And also workforce transformation could be changing it. So as NTWs are being replaced with FTEs, there could be some period of time where the FTEs are getting used to the role, and they're not quite using the tool at the same level that their predecessors were. So those are some of the things that we can look at here. And I always recommend that once you come up with this list of drivers, keep a list and then keep revisiting it every time to see if there's something that that has happened recently that might be driving up your metric, and so that you don't have to start from zero and start brainstorming these each time you're trying to do an evaluation. So I just went through and said a whole bunch of words, but I want to really boil it down to three things. First of all, you want to form a hypothesis. What do I think is driving my metric the way it's actually trending? And we just went through a number of possible hypotheses a minute ago. So maybe it's a new notification that I sent out. So once you form your hypothesis, what? You check your data and see if your data supports it. So if we see that we had no notifications go out and that correlates with the spike in usage, then it's probably a pretty good evidence that that's a good hypothesis. And then what you need is you want to validate it by checking in with your customers, because the data may support it, but you may find out that, yeah, that was part of it, but there was some other reason that's not even on your list that also came into play that drove the usage up or down. So those are the things. Form your hypothesis, test it with your data, and then test it with your customers. And when you test it with your customers, just pick a few customers that are regular users that you know you have a relationship, and we'll give you some honest feedback. So our second example is going to be on happiness. So we're going to use cloud security. And this example is quite a bit different because we actually have some reasons for why our trend is looking like it is, but we want to actually understand how to keep it the way it is. So our goal here is customers are comfortable that their assets on the cloud are secure, so they're happy because they know they're secure. And the metric we have here is that there's 0 security incidents on the cloud. All right, sounds pretty straightforward. So here's our metric. You can see it's flat, and that's good because we don't want any security incidences. So we ask our questions: what do I expect to be happening based upon the current situation? And then, of course, what is happening with the trend? So the answer to the first one is, well, the security team is constantly doing things to improve security, so they expect and want it to stay flat at 0. And what is happening? Well, it's staying flat. So what's the problem? Do we need to look any further? Well, I tell you what, the team knows that they want to keep it at 0, and they also know that the possibility for new vulnerabilities to come up continue to grow. So they have to constantly take action in order to keep this at 0. So the way that this team used this metric is a little bit different than the last example. So they came up with a statement saying that basically the types of security threats continue to grow and that they need to take proactive steps constantly to keep this at 0. And then they looked at areas where they think that there are threats that could put this metric in jeopardy. And one of the things that they found is that there's a number of active service accounts that may not be needed. And service accounts, having a lot of service accounts out there that people could use, but people may not even know about, is a bad security profile to have. So they wanted to look at what they can do to close out this possible exploitation. And so here, notice they're using their metric as a foundation to talk about a business case of an activity that they want to undertake. And so the activity that they want to do is they want to make sure that all application teams have visibility into their service accounts. Today they don't have those. So when they're originally provisioned and put on the cloud, they have service accounts set up. They may have never used those, and they may have requested a number of additional ones since and may have lost track of the service accounts they have. And there's no place that they can go to see those service accounts, so they don't even know what they have. So the first thing is to make those visible so teams know what they have. And so what they're going to do, their proposed solution is to make all of those visible through Vault. So they're going to provision to Vault, and then through Vault, all teams will be able to see all of their service accounts. And then the other thing that they can do is once teams know that they have the accounts, they'll stop requesting replicated accounts that are not actually used. Now this seems fairly simple, but this is actually a little bit of a chunk of a work, and the team needed to make sure that it was well understood and that they had permission, approval to go off and invest in this area. And what this project really is yes, there is some development here in going out and migrating the way that service accounts are set up so that they are put into Vault so that you can see them. But then there's all of these other service accounts. I think there's something like 11,000 service accounts that are out there that they need to make sure are either understood and in use, or that they are not active and they get rid of them. So that's the whole effort of going through and doing that evaluation. So they needed to really come up with a project proposal that they could get support on. And security is obviously important, and the way that they are able to lay this out and tie it back to their metric and why it's important really got them support to undertake this project. So this is a different way to use your metric. The next example we're going to do is Cloud Assist, and we're going to look at engagement here. And the goal here is that customers are using the self-service tools and not opening service requests for tasks that they can do themselves because, hey, there's a self-service tool to do it. And the metric that they want to see is declining self-service capable service requests submitted. So if there's a self-service tool, they don't want someone to be submitting a request for them to do it on their behalf. So let's go out and see what they found out about their metric. So in this case, take a look at their trend, and they ask themselves the questions, what do I expect it to be doing? And the answer here is I expect the trend to steadily decrease, right? Because they're out there taking actions to make sure that people understand what self-service tools are available to them. And then the next thing is, what is the trend doing? Well, you can see it's the blue number actually here. And P.S. I would advise that this just be a line graph and each of these two separate ones be measured separately. But here's the graph that they have, and you can see that it's 85, 49, and 58. So it's also kind of going up and down. And the team really needs to understand why. And so if the trend is going up, they came up with a hypothesis. And the hypothesis was, hey, one of the other products within the CCOE team might have changed something in their self-service tool that was not communicated well or is causing confusion. And therefore, people who would normally go out and do self-service are having to come to us and ask us to do it for them because they're confused. And so the next thing that they would do is, if that's their hypothesis, they would go out and say, okay, I need to look at the service requests and see if there's anything in common with these service requests. Are they focused around a specific tool or capability? And if the answer is yes, then they can go to that team and say, hey, did you guys change something with, let's just say, the IAM role provisioning tool? They can go out and talk to the team that owns that tool and find out if something changed that is causing confusion. And if they go to the team and they say, yes, we did make a change, then they can understand how the change was made. They can look at the change, see if it's confusing. They could talk to the team about how it was communicated, etc. So these are the things that the team can do in order to get to the bottom of this quandary. So in this case, the team did all those activities and they did find their answer. And what happened is there's a bunch of applications that are on in containers on the cloud that are migrating from the CCP platform to the Kubernetes platform. And as these teams are migrating, they're not being prepped enough on the new tools that are applicable for the Kubernetes or K8 conductor, and so they are having to ask the team, the support team, to do things that they would have done themselves if they were still on CCP. So they found their answer, and now they can work with the team that's managing that project to make sure as teams are migrating, they're better prepped to start using the new tools. All right, so that's what this team found out. Okay, so now let's review. The first thing that you want to do is you want to take a look at your metric and you want to ask your question, what do I expect to be happening with the metric and what is happening with the metric? From there, you define your gap. Your gap is the difference between the two. And then you want to form a hypothesis that explains the gap. And you may have several hypotheses and rank order them and check your first one first. So check your data to see if you have data that supports your hypothesis. And if it does, great. Then the last thing you want to do is, if it looks like it's right, check in with your customers and validate that that hypothesis is true and there's not something else that you're overlooking. And I don't want to underestimate the value of keeping a list of the levers that move your metric up and down, so that when you see your metric moving up and down, until it just is like such habit for you and you have all this stuff in your head, you can refer to your list of things that you've discussed in the past that can make that metric go up and down, and you can see if one of those is probably the reason that you can take as your first hypothesis and test it and keep adding to that list. So now my pitch. You have your metrics, go measure them, and start looking at them and learn from your metrics. Don't worry about starting, just start and try it. And if you need some help, please be sure to reach out. I'm always available to help out, or reach out to one of the folks in the Heart community. Thank you very much. Appreciate your attendance.